Welcome, everyone, to our press conference, Women for Climate Justice, Leading Solutions. My name is Osprey Oriolake, and I'm the Executive Director of the Women's Earth and Climate Action Network, WECAN. And I first want to welcome these outstanding leaders. I'm so honored to be sitting here with all of them. Our first speaker is going to be Colette Pichon-Battle. She is Vision and Initiatives Partner for Taproot Earth. She's a lawyer and climate justice activist from the USA. Then we will be hearing from Tylee Terena from the Terena Nation. She's an Indigenous rights activist, and we're honored to also have her be one of our WECAN coordinators in Brazil. Then we will be hearing from Zukiswa White, who is the coordinator for the Women and Gender constituency from South Africa. And then finally, we will be hearing from Casey Camp-Hornick from the Ponca Nation. She's the Nation Environmental Ambassador. She's also on our WECAN board, which we're very honored to have her. And also, she is the chair for the Indigenous Council for the Global Alliance for Rights of Nature. Indigenous, Black, and Brown women, grassroots women in all of their diversity, and global advocates are gathered at COP29 to strategize and accelerate our collective efforts to halt the worst impacts of the climate crisis, to stop extractivism, and to protect our lands, forests, water, and our children's future. And we are fierce and we are furious. And we also do not forget the voices of women and feminist leaders who are not here at the COP, and we carry all of you with us who are listening. We know solutions exist that can mitigate the worst impacts of the climate crisis, and that women indeed are leading the way. As just one example, studies show that with just a 1-unit increase in something called the Women's Political Empowerment Index, with just a 1-unit increase, we see an 11.51% decrease in a country's carbon emissions. And it's not all about carbon emission reductions, but it's just to say that we could give you stats until midnight on why women are leading the way, and I would really encourage people to look at our website and many others that show women's role in climate solutions. Whether it's on the front lines of resistance to fossil fuels, protecting and replanting forests, creating food sovereignty networks, or advocating for transformative climate policies, women are leading the way. And this is why WECAN is uplifting women and community solutions, strategies, policies, and frameworks. It is code red for humanity, and we are drawing a red line to say no more sacrifice people and no more sacrifice zones. We must move forward with the climate justice framework. This is a time to unite together to build a healthy and equitable future we know is possible for each other and for our Earth. And on every continent, women land defenders are rising, in many cases literally putting their bodies and lives on the line to protect Mother Earth, our communities, and all that we hold dear. There's a historical connection to the violence against women and violence against Mother Earth that we cannot afford to ignore, and it has to be stopped and it has to be healed. I ask you to join me in standing in solidarity with women's movements around the world, rising as caretakers and as protectors and defenders of our precious planet and our communities. And importantly, the pressure and insight of global people's movements are central to pushing forward transformative and bold leadership right now, because we do not have the politics in place to tackle our multiple interlocking crises. In fact, we are facing even more challenging and oppressive governments, so our movements need to be supported even more. So we need to draw upon the knowledge and leadership of Indigenous, Black, and Brown, and frontline women and feminists who are already deeply engaged in solutions. And it should be noted that a UN report found that 74% of the speaking time at the UN climate negotiations is taken up by men. This has to change. Our WECAN network is speaking out in the recognition of the sacred interdependence of all life on Earth, and with the knowledge that business as usual, extractive economic models, and colonialism have ushered in an era of planetary destruction. Our call to action for gender justice, racial justice, upholding Indigenous rights and rights of nature, calling for a just transition, and immediately phasing out fossil fuels is an ongoing agenda for people and planet. It is an urgent call for our very survival. Since the signing of the Paris Agreement, the world's 60 largest banks have funneled over $6.9 trillion into the fossil fuel industry. Meanwhile, the latest emissions gap report reveals our planet is on a trajectory to surpass 3 degrees of warming. This is a death sentence for millions and a disaster for every living being. In the face of these disastrous numbers, we demand that government leaders stand up to the fossil fuel industry instead of catering to them. We know that there are over 1,700 fossil fuel lobbyists at this COP29. This is unacceptable. We want the polluters out. And we must have real commitments from governments and financial institutions to phase out fossil fuels and instead invest in a just transition. In response, WECAN is releasing our policy brief called Climate Justice Recommendations for Nationally Determined Contributions, Guidance for a Healthy and Equitable Future for People and Planet. This is what we think the NDC should look like. The upcoming NDCs represent a critical juncture as the targets and objectives set will influence climate action and policy until 2035, marking the last opportunity to implement transformative actions needed to avoid exceeding the 1.5C limit and climate catastrophe. It is crucial that we push governments to approve their NDCs with a climate justice framework, including gender-responsive climate policies, the care economy, Indigenous rights, a just transition, and human rights at the center. This is also a COP where we, along with global movements, are accelerating our calls for a fossil fuel phase-out and a climate justice framework for climate finance. As we make these demands, we also know that it is essential to make clear what are false solutions to the crisis, including dangerous or unproven techno-fixes, carbon offset schemes that don't work, net zero pledges that delay immediate action, amongst others. At COP29, WECAN is releasing a policy analysis, the need for real zero, not net zero, shifting from false solutions to real solutions, and a just transition. And this report details these issues, and we really encourage you to look at it. Lastly, we can't set emission goals while fueling the problem, allowing new oil and gas and coal projects. We need an international mechanism to complement the Paris Agreement and address the root cause of the climate crisis. So we are calling for governments to cooperate and negotiate a fossil fuel non-proliferation treaty that will manage the fossil fuel phase-out in a way that is fast, fair, financed, and feminist. There's simply no time to lose. Women are rising. We are not waiting. We can act now, and we must act now. No matter what governments are doing in this space, we will move forward. What is happening here does not define us. We are carrying the solutions, and we ask you to stand with us. Thank you. And now I'm honored to hand the floor to Colette.
Thank you, Asprey. And it's an honor to be here with this wonderful panel. My name is Colette Pichon-Battle. I come from the great state of Louisiana, and I bring greetings from the traditional Choctaw Territory in southeast Louisiana. I live on land that my grandmother taught me to honor. She taught me to honor the water. She taught me to listen to the land, and she taught me to love family. And family, when it's given to you by your grandmother, it's not just those people who are blood relations. Your family are all that are around you and all who depend on you and that you depend on. Is a lesson in human dignity. The land is not just the house you live in. It's the trees, it's the food, it's the things you depend on. And that is a lesson in cooperation. And the water we have to honor, especially in South Louisiana, as something very powerful. It shifts and it moves with no borders and with an understanding of a right of all things to move and migrate. My grandmother was unique, but some would say not so special. She understood herself as a grain of sand. And there are many women who teach their granddaughters how to understand our role on this planet as something more than just one of domination. But we owe it to ourselves to move in a collective way and to move with our family. There are women all across the South leading these fights. There are women who are leading disaster recovery in North Carolina and Florida. This is care work that is often not valued, not paid, and often unseen. There are women leading recovery work from floods in Kentucky, in Kenya, and in Brazil. This is work to help find our people, to help find our treasures. There are women there that we never see. There are women on the front lines across this work. And we are also on the front lines of the violence that comes with the man camps that come into our communities for more fossil fuel drilling and fracking. We are on the front lines for what happens to families when you go through disaster and the tension within a marriage brings the tension on the woman. We are on the front lines of many things, and yet we're still fighting. One thing that we need to understand about a feminist perspective and a feminine approach is that we could choose this moment to do something more than dominate. We could use feminine power to create and to save ourselves. Black women in particular, in the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina, they mapped our communities, they found their people, they kept our culture together, and this is a role that means more than any building or any rebuilding of a road or a bridge. We have to talk more than just about greenhouse gas reduction and future impacts of climate change. Climate change is happening now. We're gonna have to rebuild our community, which means we're gonna have to practice courage with allies, something that women leaders have to do all the time. We will not always like the people who are next to us, but we will have to figure out how to build and rebuild our communities with whoever is near us. Collective governance means we're going to have to actually practice collective decision making, something that a feminist perspective does naturally. It is not one or the other. It can actually be all of us together. We're going to have to practice radical forgiveness. This is a principle that really requires a level of faith that women bring to the work, and it is often invisible. Radical forgiveness to those who are harming us so that we can move forward. And we're going to have to do honorable restoration. And this means we're going to have to practice repair. At COP29, the honorable repair, the practicing of a first step towards repair, is nothing less than $1.3 trillion in climate finance. And we have to make sure that this is not going to cause more debt and more obligation on the communities that need it most. At COP29, we're going to have to understand that our work is to build power together. And if our governments aren't going to stand for the right thing, then the civil society who is here is going to have to, we're going to have to be loud and we're going to have to be clear. Not all of our governments are representing the voices of the people, but the women who are here to fight, we're here to win, and we're here to make sure that what is not forgotten is the contribution that women make into this climate justice work every day so that all of us can live and survive. I'm honored to be a part of this tradition. I'm honored to be a part of this conversation. And I'm also willing to take my feminine energy and bring a collective power so that we can all survive. Ashe.
Thank you so much for your powerful words, Colette. And now I'm going to hand the floor to Tylee Tarina. Thank you, Tylee.
Thank you, Osprey. Unachina kieye, unji Tylee, aina poya kwe tukovici. And I'm just recognizing, presenting myself in my traditional language, and also saying thank you for the spirit to be here. For us, indigenous peoples, we need to have a clear understanding on what it is, just transition, that we are here having these discussions inside those rooms. Because for us, this transition that is being opposed to us is not really just. It's not really fair for our people. So we need to have a clear understanding on what is this just transition about it. Unfortunately, we didn't have any updates. We didn't move forward in the negotiations rooms, and unfortunately, yesterday we had an event that, even though a lot of states were saying that they would include civil society participation, include indigenous people's rights, yet we didn't have the time to speak. So how come they will say that they will guarantee that our movements are part of this transition when we yet don't even have the floor to speak and say what is the transition that we're looking for? In my end, I am here following agriculture. Unfortunately, agriculture doesn't have the proper attention that it should have in these rooms. People are only thinking about food systems and how climate change is affecting our productions, but they don't recognize the responsibility that industrial food production has on climate change. 24% of the emission of greenhouse gas comes from agribusiness industry, from this industrial food production. Also, it's important to say that the energy transition that a lot of people are mentioning here as a clean energy is not clean at all. It has indigenous bloods in this production of energy. Mining the critical energy transitional minerals, 54% according to the UN data, comes from the indigenous lands. We have in Brazil cases of traditional communities and indigenous peoples that are being removed for their traditional lands because of this just transition in energy. So I'm here to say that if we want to do this really transitional process, we need to guarantee that indigenous peoples have their rights recognized. We have the free, prior, and informed consent. This is not to be something in the text or in their speeches, but something that is really being applied. So, from our perspective, when we say about just transition, we need to guarantee that this transition is protecting our rights as indigenous peoples, our rights as human beings, our rights to protect our biodiversity, our ecosystems, and ways of life. Transition cannot be based on carbon market as they are here promoting as a great solution for the planet. Transition cannot be I'm sorry, I don't know if it's okay.
Everything's okay.
Okay, so I call people here that when we talk about just transition, we have this on minds, and especially bringing the youth perspective for what is this. In youth, our perspective need to be in these positions. If the planet, we're going to be the ones, we're already feeling the climate change in our daily lives. I see a lot of youth that are having anxiety because they don't know what's going to happen in their future. We are not being part of the decision-making process, and especially the indigenous youth that are now not only having access to their lands, not only access to the traditional, but they are also being denied to speak in the spaces. So we make all the effort to come here to talk about our realities and to contribute to the solutions that the planet needs, but unfortunately we're not being taken into account. So this is that I wanted to bring. I don't see that we're gonna have a real position paper about the just transition and negotiations, and I hope that next year we can have a more serious relation about it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kylie, for all your work on the Just Transition work group, and also just to say, you know, it's so difficult because people don't realize by putting this off for a year, it means more people die and are hurt. So thank you for your work on that and strong words. I'd like to hand the floor now to Zukiswa. Thank you, Zukiswa.
Thank you, Osprey. Check. The fight to keep 1.5 alive, the fight to fiercely protect and defend land and life from the cruelty of self-serving and self-sabotaging greed of capitalism and its pillars of exploitation, oppression, and violence upon which it is anchored is one we will not stop fighting for as long as we have breath in our body. There have been bigger fights than ending a system that is quite literally fast-tracking human extinction, that people's movements of resistance have fought and won. This includes the divine right of kings and queens to rule, This includes slavery as a legal institution. This includes fights against patriarchy that denied women and girls, queer and trans people, the right to exist on their own terms. And where these persist, such as what we are seeing where women are criminalized for literally hearing their own voices, we are in solidarity with and fighting against these too. And just like the people from my country fought against the imperial and colonial core right until we won, so too will the people who are currently being genocided for over 7 decades fight and win. South Africa did it, Palestine will do it too. Sudan will do it too. And everywhere else where injustice persists, people's movements will fight until they win. And as the arc of history tells us, the wheel of justice always bends. Transition is not a matter of if, it is simply a matter of when and how. We are well beyond the if. And what we want to say to those who are profiting from harm is simply that we will fight you too. We will not relent in recapturing the imaginations of billions of people around the world. Human beings are not sacrifice zones. The land is not for indefinite sale. And where capitalist greed sees profit, we see sustenance, self-determination, identity, and connectedness. Where patriarchy sees numbers and statistics rendered to perpetual marginalization and exclusion, we see agency, innovation, and leadership. When negotiators decide on trade schemes in the disguise of so-called carbon markets, we see the catalytic potential of systems change to end capitalism, greed, exploitation towards transformative climate justice and a world that divests from harm and invests in care. Don't let them fool you as I close. They know that there are more of us than them. They know that they can no longer ignore the science and the mobilization of millions of women, of indigenous peoples and communities around the world. And that is why there are more of them here than you. The them, I mean the fossil fuel lobbyists. We have a saying in my country that a dog does not bark at a still car. We are clearly not still, and that is why there's so much investment in capturing our imaginations and wanting us to believe that what we are calling for, which is protecting land and life, is not possible. They know they are wrong, and they know that more of us are coming to the party. And so we will fight them until we win, as we have demonstrated across history, as we are demonstrating with our presence and insistence, even in a space that is proving that it's no longer fit for purpose. But people's movements around the world will fight until we win. Thanks, Osprey.
Thank you so much, Sukiswa, for those powerful words, and I hand the floor now to Casey Campornik. Thank you.
Latia, Judy Panka, Abadi, Mashte Panka, Oklahoma. Greetings. My name is Judy, my true name. My colonized name is Casey Campornik. I'm Panka, means sacred head, from the occupied territory of Oklahoma and all of Turtle Island as an occupied territory. I recognize the truth in what my relatives have said here, each and every one, and I recognize the passion that comes behind each and everything. I closed my eyes while you spoke, so I could not just see you and hear you, but feel you. And then I looked around to see what the power is, because we sit in a place that calls itself power. We sit in a place that calls itself a leadership of the global self. I call that a lie. I call that another false solution. The false solutions around carbon trading, for instance, with the Ponca people, means that if you're buying carbon credits anywhere else on the globe, that the Ponca people are going to be killed by the fossil fuel people who are emitting the carbon in our territory. It's that clear. Any time that anybody, anywhere, falls for these false solutions and says net zero, there's a carbon market. Why is that existing? Because they're making the money and they're continuing to pollute because of buying those carbon credits. Of believing that you can sequester the air and the very breath underneath the earth, which will come up. They are buying and selling all of the sacred things. They're talking about biodiversity credits. You are biodiversity. Are you that next thing to be bought and sold? We talk about slavery. What are we living in right now? What are the parameters around us in this particular space for us to raise our voices, for us to name the states, for us to name the polluters? We've been told no. So we get louder, we get stronger, we get more organized. We follow the instructions of Mother Earth, and I tell you, she's over it. She's over it. And that's why there's bigger tornadoes. That's why there's bigger hurricanes. That's why there's floods. That's why there's fires. That's why there's a big storm coming everywhere. And that's why the earthquakes are happening, is because Mother Earth is determined to live within the natural laws that have always existed. And if we care about the generations to come, we will align ourselves with what is true power, not the power of these halls. We're only here to teach them and remind them of their own humanity, their own natural laws that has allowed them to be part of creation from time immemorial, but that time is finite. Every other living being has followed the natural law except humans. Humans believe that they can buy and sell themselves out by creating a piece of paper and putting a number on it and telling you that it's worth a life. It's worth the life of a tree, it's worth the life of your breath, it's worth the life of a river, it's worth the life of the future generations. So we as women, we who carry within our wombs the sacred life, as our Mother Earth has done for us, nurtured us. Even though we've misbehaved, she's nurtured us. She's held us at her breast and given us everything that we need for all this time. What is our responsibility? That's what we have to ask ourselselves. Our responsibility is to warrior up and do what's right. It's that simple. Do you want life on earth to continue? Do you want your generations to be part of it? Follow the natural law.
Thank you so much. I really hope everyone will take these words to heart and mind as we go through the last few days of the COP together. We are not waiting, we are rising. We are not waiting, we are rising.
Thank you. Oh, you need a picture? Did we take a
I
picture?
think we got one. Move in, girls. We're going to grab a quick picture. Oh, go down.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, WECAN community.